kind of pointed them out. Spend some time browsing in the area here for the tools. The idea is you select your process when it's running, and then when it's running you can select the tool here. So here I'm going to click down here and say I want com.servant. So there's my hello. And then we've got all these different tools that we can use. And so another tool that's available, another big new one that takes advantage is the Android device monitor, which if you've been using Eclipse, you'll see it looks kind of like the Debug or device monitor system. Here it's called the Android device monitor. It's actually a separate application that starts up. And this also gives you insight to a lot of information as your application runs. So one of the takeaways when you leave tonight, I want you to think of the Android Studio not only as a development tool, but also a tool you can use to debug and test and observe what's going on. What's cool about this, we're seeing a list of all the processes as they're running here, and here's our particular process, right, the one we just wrote. This is actually the process ID, and that can be important if you go down to the command line and start executing low-level Linux commands. You can actually look up a lot of information about the process. But across the top here, I want you to notice you can watch the threads, you can watch heap usage, memory allocation, you can watch network activity, you can look down at the file system on the device itself. There's various ways you can control the emulator, and there's also system information showing everything from the CPU load to also the overall memory usage, as well as frame rendering rates when you're doing high intensity graphics. So all this is available, and you can have this running. Some of the options are turned off by default. So for example, threads, they don't monitor the threads unless you ask it to monitor the threads. So if I wanted it to monitor it, I'd come over here and click on this and say I want to see the threads updated. Notice what's always interesting about Android is although we've written a single application that's running on a single thread as far as our code just single thread, we see in the background what's running is a bunch of threads. And of course we could also create additional threads and see how they're running here and watch what's going on. And not only that, as you click on each thread, it shows you the stack trace of where it's at that particular point in time. So here on main, I know exactly where I'm at in my code. Right now it's just waiting for a message to come in the message queue. So lots of very rich debugging tools. If all that is not enough, once you know your process ID, so in this case 2795, I can switch over to the command line, and there are a bunch of tools. Let's see, I think I'm in the right location. Here under the Android SDK, there's a number of command line tools you can use. And I'll just show probably one of the more powerful ones. If I do a ls, let's see, on platform, let's see, tools, notice there's a tool called ADB. ADB is the Android Debug bridge. So here's what I'm going to do. Now that I know I've got this process ID 2795, I'm going to say use the Android Debug bridge. Let me go into my platform, tools, the Android Debug bridge, and I want to open up a shell. This allows me to actually connect a shell session to this emulated device. In fact, if you're coming from a Unix or a Linux background, things like ls to list the directory contents or ps to list the process status, all that is available. It turns out it's very easy to see a Java application running because this area here, let me do a, show this line here. This column right here, this column is the virtual memory size of your application as it's running right here. And notice the virtual memory size when I ran the ps command, which stands for process status, and the shell command, which is here, right? Just very small amounts of memory compared say cat/proc. Let me actually do, so cat/proc/maps, which is going to be the memory maps of my process. So I said I was 29, was it 29 or 2795? So I'm going to say 2795 and show me the memory map that this process is using. And when I don't want to go into the details, there's a course I offer called Android Internals that covers this. But very briefly, all of these things on that right-hand side of the screen are shared objects, shared object libraries that all together make up these Android applications. So when you're running your Android code, it's actually calling down at some point into all of these libraries. And I could just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. It's just amazing how much stuff is available to you, the application developer, to access. In fact, this library here, this ART, this libart, this is the new Android runtime shared object. Notice there was another good question during the break. Sometimes when you're looking at things, you'll see Dalbec, even though you're running on Android 5. And those are just names, they haven't updated yet. So a message to leave you with, tons of very good debugging and diagnostics tools, as well as a great development tool. So let me do part 2 of this demo. Let's develop an app, and let's do like what many people do. They want to have both a free version and a paid version, but they'd like to have a single code base. So I'm going to shut this one down. Go ahead and do a close project. And let's start a new one. And we'll have another, we'll say hello, free and paid app. So the idea, I want to have a single project, have a free version, have a paid version. What this means is when I build, I'm going to have 2 packages get created. So let's go and do it next. I'll just use all the defaults here. The reason I chose this as a demo, it shows you some of the features you pick up by using Gradle. Think of Gradle as a way to build projects. And I'm going to look at this Gradle script. This is totally new stuff. In Eclipse, we didn't have anything like this, at least not by default for Android. And there's a lot of different ways you can look at it, but you can actually just short circuit. Instead of looking at all these different things, you can go to the build.gradle and look at your module. What Android has done is added a plugin that makes Gradle know about Android projects. The key word here, they call this an element. This is the Android specifics part of this build process. Something I want you to observe, very different in Android 5, is no longer do you put your minimum and your target and other information about the SDK you're targeting. You don't put that in the manifest anymore. You used to put a lot of information in the Android manifest. Now we'll see a lot of that goes into Gradle because depending on which configuration you're building, you may want to change that. So we have a default configuration. We have a default application ID. I'm going to copy that because I'm going to use it. We have some build types. Notice this entry here, build variants. It allows you to change how you're building at any given time. You get 2 by default. I've got a debug and a release. So I do my debugging, and then later on I can do a release, build it, everything's cool. Well, for the build variants, here what I'm going to say is I want to now make a change to Gradle. Now notice as soon as I touch the enter key, you have this message here. I wish they'd make it a little more visible because as I've taught this, I find this causes some issues. When you edit Gradle, they want you to click on Sync Now to make sure everything's in sync and it knows you've made changes to your configuration. So I'm going to create what's called a product flavor. And notice as I type, it says, oh, you want to create some product flavors? Yes, I do. I want to create 2 product flavors. I want to have a free app, and I also want to have a paid app. So I'm going to have free, and I'm going to have paid. to say, let's call this one the same name dot free, and then this one will be the same name dot paid. What this means to you is you're going to actually create two separate bundles, and you could upload on the store your free version, you could upload on the store your paid version. I'm also have unique version numbers for these. So I'll come here and say, instead of being version 1, which is my default, I'm going to override that, make this the free version, and then for this one, I'll make it the paid version. Now, once I've edited that, when I come up here and say sync now, it's going to take that information, go through it, figure it all out, and notice right here, our build variants, we now can build both a free version of our app and a paid version of our app, both debug and release modes. Also, by default, whatever we build that's not under one of these will be common code. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to come over here and say, you know what? Let's go to the, let's go to our layout. We'll go to our resource. In fact, it's right here. And why don't we just grab a button? And on this button, let's make this simple. We'll say, let's see, show free or paid app. Now the deal is, when you click on this button, if you purchase the free app, I want you to see the free code. If you've got the paid app, I want you to see the paid. I want to build it all from here. So this is going to be the common code. So I'll go and type A, I'll do O, and I'll just call it do button. And I'll go ahead, I see my little idea, I click on it. Now notice my idea right now is not yet synced up, it's not yet noticed that yet. Right? It's like he's got, sometimes he will not sync up right away, and if you give it, if you pause just a moment, he'll typically then add that. Let's see if he's there. Now he added. Did you notice that? As an instructor, when I first started teaching this studio, just like when I first started teaching Eclipse, there'd be times where it wasn't working. And of course, as an instructor, you start panicking right away because what seems like seconds to you, I'm sweating. It's like, really? And so I've noticed sometimes when it doesn't work the first time, just be patient and try again. So now, right, we went from having 3 choices to now we've got 4 choices. So I'm going to choose this one, say let's add this new button. And here's the interesting thing. I want to execute some code here that's going to be different based on whether you did the paid app or the free app, but I don't want to change my source code. I just want to have it at build time. So I'm going to say to do display, we'll say display a new activity. Reason I wanted to do the to-do, I wanted to show you another feature of the Android Studio. Anytime you put a to-do, you can very quickly navigate back to that. And indeed, I need to come back to here in just a moment. Okay, so let's focus on building we could either build free or paid first. Let's focus, I guess we'll focus on the free one. So I'm going to say, we want to do a free app, so I'm going to change to my project. And under my project, I'm going to say, under our application, not only do I want to build source code for a test project and for the main project, but I also want to add a new category of source code. So I'll do a file, new, and with my file new, I will choose to just create a new directory. And in this new directory, I'm going to call it free. And the idea is, under my source code, anything I put in free will only be used in my free build. In a moment, I'll also create a paid, and anything I create there will only be used in paid. So I've got my free, but now I need to put another new directory because I want to write some Java code. All right, we will write some Java code. Now what I want to do is when you touch that button, I want to display a new activity that in this case will say this is the free version, maybe you want to upgrade. So with that selected, I'll click on it and say let's create a new. In this case, I want to create a new activity. And I'll just choose the simple blank activity. So I'm going to create a new blank activity. Let's call this the, just for simplicity, I'll call it the second activity. And we'll have a layout, we'll have a name. And notice the package name here is going to be com serving hello. It wants to put the .free on the end of that. But I'm going to say no, I don't want to put the .free. I'm going to put it part of my main package. So I'm going to say finish. And again, be patient. The first time I did this demo, I was like panicking. Where is all the code? Because I'm expecting a bunch of code to appear here in a moment. Notice it took about 15 seconds. And what it did was generate for us not only the activity code here, the second activity, but also we've got our layout has been created for us as well. So this is called second activity. And let's do this. I will open up the second activity. And let's see, I will let me go into design mode. And let me just say that we're all done. I'll come here to I'll just put a done button here. In fact, I won't even have to do that. It turns out when you press the back button on an activity, it takes you back to being done. So I'll come here where it says hello world, and instead of saying hello world, notice here this is actually a string resource. So instead of using a string resource, I'll just say this is the free version of the app. We've got the free version of the app. Notice this is a subtle bug I've seen happen sometimes. It will get confused, and here basically I've got an error saying he cannot find this, and actually it's right here. So I'll go ahead and make them the same, get rid of that error. These are just some of the rough edges that are on the tool, but remember this is the preview release. It's actually 1.1. So I've got those changed. And now, if I build the free version of the app, of course we should see it work when I display the second activity. So let me do this. I'm going to go back to my Android view of things. And notice right here, it says we're building the free version. Here's our main code that's built both for when we build a test and for when we build free. We're going to build this code. So this is the code that's common. So I'll come down here to my to-do, or what I should have done, just come here and click on the to-do, come back to that location. And I'll say, let's do this. Let's create an intent. An intent is like a message. It's basically information. And notice he's saying, you want me to resolve that? Press Alt-Enter, and he'll resolve it for me. So I'm going to create an intent. This will be a new intent of this, meaning of the activity, and I want to use this second activity that we just created. So I'm going to say create an intent of that, giving it the class name, and then we'll say let's start that activity. In Android, this is the main way you go from one activity to the other. You create what's called an intent, and you switch to that intent. So starting the activity. So before we build the paid version, let's make sure our free version works okay. So I'll go ahead and do a build. And again, look down here, we see that Gradle is executing these tasks. In this case, we're building the free debug version. And as soon as it pops up my device chooser, I will choose the emulator. Say, yep, go ahead and run it on. Actually, yeah, go ahead and run it on the emulator. Shows us copying the code over. Remember in Android 5, it copies the code and then it does ahead of time, AOT, ahead of time compilation. Converts it into the machine code of the machine. You start executing. And so now, with this one, I say show free or paid. And we come over and we say we've got the free version of the app. Okay, well, that's kind of expected. I'll press the back button and go back to the previous activity. Okay, so show the free. So what I want to do is take this this app. Now remember, the key thing here is I don't want to have any code change when I implement this. So what I'm going to do is go back to my project, and I'm going to say within my project, I'm going to choose this free code we created a while ago. By the way, notice we're getting some errors in main, because right now, main, Java, he doesn't know about that second activity because that was part of the configuration based on free, as opposed to now I'm doing the paid variant. So I'm going to take this code and do a copy. Say copy that complete directory. I've got all my free version. And then I'm going to say let's paste it here in the source. I'm going to do a paste. So at that point when I paste it, instead of calling it free, this particular product version will be my paid version. I'll click OK. And so what it will do is basically take all that code we wrote, put it into this directory called paid. And again, it just takes a moment. And once it's got it in there, what we will do is go to our layout. And we know the layout right now says it's the free version. But I'm going to go here, and instead of saying the free version, I'm going to say this is the paid version. Of course, in real life, the free version might say, hey, you want to upgrade. The paid version might say something else. But here we've got the paid version of our app. Now remember, the way this works, we have what are called build variants. And you can change the variant you want to build here in the studio. When you're doing your production build, everything I'm doing here within this Android Studio can also be done from shell scripts and from the command line. So you can build, running these Gradle build process, you can build both APKs at the same time. But here for test purposes, I'm going to say I want to focus on running my paid version. And remember, I haven't changed the main code. All I've said is I want to now use the paid version of this app. So we'll come over here to our emulator, start it up. Let it, it says show free, I think. There we go. So here's the new one. So show free or paid. So I click on this, and now notice this is the paid version of the app. So this is one of the big new features to have what they call build variants. So single source based. You might want to build based on customer. Like I've talked to some people that are going to use this where they have a single code base, but they customize it per customer you're working with. You may customize it based on hardware. In fact, a lot of the things that we do in this now, notice within a given, let me choose free as an example. Notice our free actually has an Android manifest. This is very different from the previous design where you put everything into your manifest. Here we see we've got one. You'll have multiple manifests, and during the build process, these Gradle scripts will pull everything together for you. So let's see. Let's go back over to the. Let's show our Gradle script. So we achieve that simply by saying we have some build flavors here. So let me summarize the big deal about Android 5. As we speak, I actually was hoping to have an Android 5 device here from my provider, and I couldn't get it in time. They basically, so I was looking for the Nexus 6, and the one that they had basically said they were actually having some hardware manufacturing problems with it. So they told me to come back in a week or two. And then I tried several others, so I couldn't get the Nexus 6, which I needed for my course. And I was going to show it to you here. But for you, the developer, right now, there's like 0.1% of all Android devices are running version 5. So a lot of people, when they see this demo, they'll say, well, hardly anyone's using version 5 right now, so I don't need to use these tools yet. The tools I demonstrated work with all the older versions as well. In fact, you could say, although I like version 5, right now I want to show product, and here with the Sdk Sdk Manager, when I bring up the Sdk Manager, although I'm not connected to the net, you can use it for your current projects. In fact, I would encourage you to take your current Eclipse project, whatever state it's in right now, export it, and then import it into here and see what happens. Right? Because this is the tool that Google has said they're going to put all their focus behind. And you can pick any of these SDKs. I'm not connected to the net, so that's why we have all the arrows there. So what are the takeaways when you leave tonight thinking about this demo? If you're an experienced Android developer, you should start thinking about when do you migrate, because, right, Google's saying this is the official tool. One of my goals tonight was to show you that migration is a straightforward process, and using the tool, it's not really that hard of a tool to learn, and it has a lot of features similar to Eclipse, and it certainly, as time goes on, it will get more robust. So that's the first takeaway for the experience. For the new users, just jump right into the Android Studio. In fact, at UCSD, I teach Android programming there. We're basically this semester we're switching from Eclipse to Android Studio. So we're showing the class on Eclipse, but we're also using Android Studio. And then next semester, it'll all be Android Studio. The other takeaway is there's a brand new runtime, kind of incredible. Here's this platform. They've got a brand new runtime, gives you a lot better performance, gives you a lot smoother operation because of the garbage collection of the memory. And for you, the developer, I just gave you a glimpse of some of the information it can provide you as it's running. So with all that, let me end by opening it up for any questions related to this, what I've demonstrated here. So any questions? I'll also hang around for individual questions once we're done here. Yes, in the back.
Yeah. Is there a way to, because I noticed that you have different code bases with both different build variants. Is there a way to make it so that you specify certain class or certain section of code that stays the same between both of them? So if you just type it one of them, it changes for both build variants or multiple build variants versus having to change for every single one?
Yeah, basically, I'll expand the scope of the questions. There's various ways you can think of building your code, including things, excluding things based on various combinations. The build system is set to handle all of that. In fact, that's one of the reasons they switched to Gradle. If you go to, I think it's gradle.org, just that project alone is a huge project. Their goal is to be the best in the world at building things, building software. So that's all they focus on. It turns out Android is just one small piece of what they focus on building. And there's tons of plugins that allow you to build the biggest enterprise Java apps you can imagine, all the way to these mobile type devices. So it's a pretty exciting time for the Android developers. The APIs I really didn't look at. I didn't make too much comments about the APIs because this was more of the tool. But there's over 4,000 new sets of APIs in almost every area for you to use. Just some examples in the area of Bluetooth. They've enhanced the Bluetooth, particularly the low energy, where not only can you be essentially the central, where you monitor all these remote devices, but you can also be one of the remote devices. So you can be a central and a peripheral. In the camera, they totally rewrote all the camera APIs to give you very high performance camera interface. The existing interface was still there, but now they call it Camera 2, totally new interface. For battery usage and job scheduling, there's a whole new set of APIs to schedule your jobs better, give you access to it, and make your battery usage better. And really across the board, just lots of new APIs for you to take advantage of. And right now is really the starting. Right at this point, this tool became available 1st of January, and right now as we speak, it's very hard to get Android 5 phones. Samsung's supposed to start rolling out upgrades here in the next few weeks. They have in other places in the world. So if you have some of the Samsung phones will get upgrades, some of the Motorola's. So soon 5 will be a bigger part of the pie that you can address with all of this. So I'm done. Thank you so much for watching this demo, and go